My mom canceled my wedding behind my back and told everyone I was financially irresponsible. I bit my tongue until I bought a house with my husband and mailed her the deed. "Who's irresponsible now?" was written on the back. I never imagined I'd one day feel like a stranger around my own mother. Growing up in Grand Rapids, our home looked like a page from a suburban home and garden magazine. My mom, Celeste, made sure of that. She took immense pride in our image: neat lawns, carefully chosen outfits, choreographed smiles for holiday cards. It wasn't just appearances, it was her way of life. Control and perception meant everything to her. My dad, Anthony, was a quieter presence. He loved numbers more than people, I think. He worked as a CPA and barely pushed back when my mom steamrolled over birthdays, school plays, and everything in between. He wasn't cold, just absent in the emotional ways that mattered. I spent most of my teenage years fighting not to become like either of them. From a young age, my mother instilled in me this constant pressure to amount to something. If I got a B in math, she'd ask, what went wrong? If I made the school play, she'd wonder if I got a good enough role. It was relentless. And because love and approval always felt tied to performance, I became very good at pretending. I smiled through it all, even when it hurt. But no performance ever earned me enough credit in her eyes. By the time I was 30, I had carved out a good life. I wasn't flashy, but I was stable. I worked in communications and had worked my way up to being a brand manager for a well-known Midwest retailer. I made decent money, had some savings, lived in a quiet part of Ann Arbor in a rented 2-bedroom condo, and most importantly, I had Ruben. Ruben came into my life when I'd stopped looking. He was nothing like the men my mother envisioned for me. Not a doctor, not a lawyer, not flashy. Just solid. Kind. A mechanical engineer who loved hiking, jazz, and couldn't care less about what kind of car someone drove. Our connection felt easy and real in a way nothing ever had before. We dated for 2 years, and when he proposed on a snowy weekend in Traverse City, I said yes without hesitation. I was 31 then. Ready, excited, and for once in my life, certain. That certainty didn't sit well with Celeste. The moment we told her about the engagement, she offered to help. She said it like a warning. Not a question, not a gesture, an announcement. Her idea of help came with strings. Dozens of them. She wanted to approve the venue, the dress, the flowers. She even wanted to weigh in on the guest list. I told her no gently at first. We appreciated her financial help, but we wanted a small wedding in Saugatuck, near the lake. A barn-style venue with wood beams and fairy lights. Something simple and intimate. That was all Ruben and I wanted. But simple doesn't impress neighbors. Simple doesn't justify the pearl earrings she bought just in case reporters came. I thought if I gave her some control, maybe it would satisfy her. I let her handle invitations and the rehearsal dinner. That was it. It wasn't enough. Behind my back, she started calling relatives and revising the story. According to her, our wedding was a shoestring affair because I was not ready financially to do things properly. She told my dad that Ruben's job was unstable. She told my aunt that she hoped we'd postpone until I came to my senses. I confronted her once after a friend told me she'd been uninvited. My college roommate, Natalie, called me in tears asking why her name had been removed from the RSVP list. My mom said bluntly, "Natalie waits tables, honey. This isn't a barbecue." It felt like I had been punched in the chest. But still, I tried to make it work. I bit my tongue. I chalked it up to her controlling nature and tried to focus on what mattered, marrying the love of my life. But it all blew up a month before the wedding. We showed up for our final venue walkthrough and were told the booking had been cancelled. Ruben looked at me, confused. "Did you cancel it?" "I thought we paid the deposit." We had. In full. The venue coordinator pulled out her clipboard and said, "The booking was cancelled 2 weeks ago. Your mother called and said the wedding wasn't moving forward." My legs nearly gave out. We rushed back to the car and drove to my parents' house. I barely waited for her to open the door before I let her have it. "You canceled my wedding?" I shouted. She blinked. Not even surprised. "You weren't ready. Someone had to be an adult." "I'm 32 years old, Mom. You're also living paycheck to paycheck." "That's not true. I saw your bank statement." "How?" She had no shame. "I fed your cat while you were in Chicago. It was in the drawer." I peeked. I was stunned and silent. She had gone through my personal finances and used them as justification to ruin one of the most important days of my life. Worse, she'd told everyone it was mutual, that I had agreed to postpone because I wasn't ready. The rage didn't come all at once. It came like a slow boil that sat under my skin for weeks. I didn't yell again. I didn't explain anything further. I just left. I walked out and didn't speak to her for 6 months. Ruben, ever my anchor, suggested we elope. Just us. No drama. We went to Oregon, his favorite state, stood on a cliff at Cannon Beach, and exchanged vows under gray skies and seagull cries. It was cold, quiet, and perfect. We spent the next 2 years rebuilding. Not just from the wedding fallout, but from everything it represented. The manipulation. The judgment. The belief that I wasn't capable of adult life unless I met her criteria for it. We started saving, diligently. Ruben picked up freelance engineering contracts and I moved into a higher-paying role managing digital branding campaigns. We clipped coupons, said no to luxuries, and by the time I turned 34, we were ready to house hunt. We found a modest craftsman in Northville, 3 bedrooms, a cozy little garden, and a fireplace that made the whole living room feel like a hug. We bought it with our own money. No cosign. No handouts. As we signed the closing papers, I thought about Celeste. And then I remembered the wedding. I printed a copy of the deed. Wrote in red ink across the back, "Who's irresponsible now?" I sealed it in an envelope. No return address. Just a congratulations sticker. I mailed it. 2 weeks passed. Then she showed up at my door. And that's where we are now. She's standing on my front porch with a pie in her hands and what I assume is an apology on her lips. She's not the same woman who canceled my wedding, but I'm not the same daughter who let her. She stood there for a moment too long, unsure of what to say, but clearly rehearsing it in her head. The pie looked homemade, apple, with the crust pressed just the way she used to do when I was little. There was something about the way her fingers tightened around the glass pie dish that made me realize how nervous she was, though she was trying to hide it behind her usual composed posture. "May I come in?" she asked, her voice quieter than I remembered. Ruben hovered in the hallway behind me. He gave me a look, not judgment, not anger. Just, "Are you okay?" I stepped outside and closed the door behind me. "No. Not yet." Her eyes flickered with emotion, something between shame and surprise. I don't think she'd prepared for that. "I got the envelope," she said, managing a weak laugh. I didn't know what to say. Honestly, I sat down on the couch and just stared at it for an hour. I didn't say anything. I crossed my arms and looked out toward the street, the wind pushing the spring branches gently against one another. "I know you're angry," she continued. I glanced at her. "Celeste, I'm not angry anymore. I'm something worse." That hit her. Her hand shifted awkwardly on the pie dish. I thought I was helping." "You thought ruining my wedding and lying to everyone was helping?" Her shoulders fell. "I didn't mean to ruin it. I thought you'd postpone, take a step back, think it through. I was scared for you." "No, Mom. You were scared of me. Scared I'd make decisions you didn't control." That stopped her. I could see her absorbing that. "You've always told yourself that controlling people is love," I said. "That meddling is helping. But that's not love. Love doesn't feel like surveillance." Love doesn't feel like shame wrapped in concern. She opened her mouth to say something, then stopped. Her face softened. I know, she finally said. I know. I've been thinking about it a lot. About how I parented you. Parenting. Past tense. I waited, not to punish her, but because I needed to see if she really meant any of it. She took a deep breath. When I was your age, I was already divorced. Your dad and I were hanging on by a thread. I was constantly scared I'd lose everything. I hated feeling small, powerless. So I created a world I could control, how our family looked, what people thought. I thought if I kept everything tidy on the outside, it wouldn't fall apart. I didn't respond. There was nothing new there. I'd always suspected as much. But in doing that, she said quietly, I made you feel small. I made you feel powerless. That one landed. My chest tightened. I read the deed over and over, she said. You did this all without me. You didn't need my help. You didn't need my judgment. And yet, I hurt you anyway. The pie was now shaking in her hands. I took it from her gently, more out of instinct than forgiveness, and placed it on the porch railing. I don't expect you to forgive me, she added quickly. I just needed to come and say it. I was wrong. I didn't trust you. I treated you like a child when you were already a woman. I wanted to believe her. God, I wanted that. But I'd built such thick walls around my heart in the last few years that nothing could get in without a chisel. I needed to buy that house, I said. Not just for me and Reuben. But to prove to myself that I could. That I wasn't some reckless little girl who didn't know how the world worked. She nodded, tears building in her eyes now. I was wrong, she whispered again. I'm sorry, Marla. I truly am. I believed she felt sorry. But there's a difference between guilt and change. Apologies are easy. Change is slow. Trust, slower. I don't know what you expect from this, I said honestly. But you showing up here, it's going to take more than that. I don't expect anything, she said quickly. I don't want anything. I just needed to face you. You didn't deserve what I did. And I'm going to keep apologizing for as long as it takes for you to believe me. That part stopped me. For once, she wasn't trying to talk me out of my feelings. She was just sitting in them. I'm seeing someone, she added. A therapist. I've been going since Christmas. I figured it was time to unpack all this. Figure out why I am the way I am. I should have done it years ago. That surprised me more than anything. I looked at her for a long time. Her perfectly styled hair was a little windblown. Her usually tight face had softened in age. There was less armor in her expression. Less performance. I don't know what this means, I said carefully. I'm still not ready to have you in my life the way we used to. I'm not sure I ever will be. She nodded, quietly accepting it. But, I added, you showed up. And you didn't make excuses. That's something. She let out a small breath of relief. That's all I hoped for. We stood in silence for a while. Two women on a porch with years between them and more miles ahead. I'll go now, she said, reaching for the pie, but I stopped her. No. I'll keep it. She gave me a look, something like surprise, maybe gratitude. Then she turned and walked back down the steps. She didn't look back. I watched her drive away. Then I picked up the pie and walked back inside. Reuben was sitting at the kitchen table. He didn't ask questions. He just looked at me, and I looked back. I placed the pie on the table, pulled out a fork, and sat across from him. You okay? He asked. I nodded slowly. I don't know. And I meant it. But for the first time in years, I don't know didn't feel like drowning. It felt like the first breath of air. Reuben didn't push for more. He knew when I needed space to sit with something. That's one of the many things I love about him, he doesn't try to solve my emotions. He just makes room for them. I stared at the pie for a long moment before slicing off a corner. The crust was flakier than I remembered. She used real cinnamon. She always did. I didn't cry. I thought I would, but I didn't. It was strange, how a moment that had haunted me for so long was finally over, and yet nothing had really settled. Just shifted. The next morning, I found myself replaying our porch conversation. Her face, her voice, the small ways she hesitated. She didn't perform it. For once, she didn't try to look like the mother she wanted to be. She just was who she was, flawed, nervous, maybe even a little broken. But that didn't erase what she'd done. I didn't tell anyone about her visit. Not at first. Not even my dad. I hadn't talked to him much since the wedding either. He'd stayed silent during the fallout. Didn't defend her, but didn't defend me either. When I tried to confront him about it back then, he gave me that same passive response he always did. I just didn't want to make things worse. So he did nothing. I'd come to accept that he was a bystander in his own life. It used to infuriate me, now it just saddened me. But a week after Celeste came by, I got an email from him. Subject line, lunch? No body text. Just the invitation. It made me nervous. He rarely reached out on his own. I told Ruben that night as we were cleaning up dinner. He wants to meet at the diner off Leonard Street, I said. Are you going? I nodded slowly. I think so. I don't know what he wants. Maybe nothing. Maybe just to show up, in his own way. Ruben wiped his hands on a towel. You don't owe them anything, Marla. I know, I said. But maybe I owe it to myself to hear what he has to say. Or just see if he's finally ready to say anything. The diner was exactly the same as it had been for decades, formica tables, squeaky booths, laminated menus that hadn't been updated since Bush was in office. I found him in a booth near the back, sipping coffee and stirring it with unnecessary intensity. Hey, kiddo, he said as I slid in. I smiled politely, but it didn't reach my eyes. We ordered, he got his usual tuna melt, I went with a turkey club. There were a few minutes of small talk, catching up on work, weather, and the house. But it didn't take long for the conversation to tilt where we both knew it would. Your mother told me she saw you, he said, watching me over his coffee. She didn't waste any time, I murmured. She was rattled, honestly. Said you didn't slam the door in her face, so she thinks there's hope. I looked down at my hands. She said she's been seeing someone. A therapist. He nodded slowly. She started after Thanksgiving. Your Aunt Margaret said something that really got to her. About how she's been living in fear for years. That she passed it on to you. I raised an eyebrow. Aunt Margaret said that? She's more observant than she lets on. We sat in silence again. I let the clink of silverware and murmur of other diners fill the gap. Why didn't you stop her? I asked eventually. The wedding. The lies. Any of it. His face folded inward, like he'd been dreading that question for years. I wish I had a better answer, he said. I think I told myself she wouldn't really go through with it. That it was just talk. That she'd come to her senses. But I've spent my whole marriage staying out of the fire. Trying to keep the peace. I felt the sting of that. He didn't try to deny it. He just sat there with it. You were supposed to protect me, I said, not angry, just hollow. Or at least stand with me. I know, he said, and to his credit, his voice cracked. I failed you there. I let her drive that car right off the cliff, and I just stood at the edge and watched. We finished our lunch quietly. When the check came, he reached for it. I didn't argue. As I walked to my car, I didn't feel resolved. But I felt acknowledged. For once. A few weeks passed. I didn't call Celeste. She didn't call me. But the silence felt different now, not hostile, not cold. Just paused. One morning, I got a small envelope in the mail. No return address, but I knew her handwriting. Inside was a folded piece of notebook paper. It read, "I made this when you were 8. You wanted to help me make dinner, so you made your own recipe book. I saved it all these years, even after the tomato soup exploded on it. I'm sorry I didn't show you how proud I was of you back then. I see it now. All of it. Love, Mom." Inside the envelope was a wrinkled index card. On it, written in purple marker, in my own childhood scrawl, "Marla's magic pasta add way too much cheese." I sat at the kitchen table for a long time with that note. She was trying. Maybe too late. Maybe not enough. But she was trying in ways she never had before. That night, I made pasta with too much cheese. Reuben laughed when I told him what it was. "Marla's magic pasta," he said. "You are full of surprises." We ate it on the couch with the TV off. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was trapped in a performance. I just felt like myself. Messy, complicated, but whole. I wasn't ready to invite her back in. But I was ready to start unboarding the windows. And sometimes, that's enough. Summer settled into Michigan like it always did, late, sticky, and with thunderstorms that rolled in like some kind of cinematic drama. I found myself in a strange in-between place. Not estranged anymore, not fully reconnected. Just cautious. Celeste continued her quiet campaign of change. Small gestures. Cards on holidays, never overbearing, never assuming. Articles clipped from magazines about therapy breakthroughs or old family recipes. I still hadn't invited her inside my home, but she didn't push. Then, in early August, I received an invitation. A wedding. My cousin Renee was getting married. She and I had been close growing up but drifted apart during the whole mess with my mom. Celeste's rumors had painted me as unstable, impulsive, irresponsible. I hadn't attended a family event in over 3 years. The invitation was addressed to Marla and Reuben. That alone made me tear up a little. We decided to go. The wedding was being held at a botanical garden in Kalamazoo. Classy, but simple. A string quartet, white chairs, the kind of elegance Celeste always claimed to appreciate, but only when it fit her mold. We arrived just before the ceremony. I wore a deep navy dress and Reuben, always effortlessly sharp, wore a slate gray suit. As we walked toward the guest area, heads turned. I could feel it. The aunts, the cousins, the ones who'd whispered behind their hands when the wedding didn't happen. Their faces said everything. There was a quiet recognition now, not just of my presence, but of the fact that I had survived everything they'd been told would ruin me. And then I saw her. Celeste was seated in the third row, next to my dad. She wore a muted cream blouse, nothing flashy, and clutched a small clutch in her lap like a lifeline. She looked up and saw me. And at that moment, for the first time in my entire life, she didn't smile to save face. She didn't gesture for me to come over. She just nodded. Subtle. Respectful. I nodded back. The ceremony passed beautifully. Afterward, we moved to the reception tent. A cousin introduced us as the couple who finally made it, and for once, it felt warm. Genuine. People weren't just smiling politely, they were curious. Asking about our house, our work, our life. "Your mom said you were doing well," one aunt said gently. She didn't really explain. "But we're glad to see you." I wasn't ready to share the whole truth. But I didn't need to. The facts spoke for themselves. We were happy, married, stable. Everything Celeste once said I couldn't be. Then came the real moment. As people were settling into tables, I noticed a new seating chart posted near the tent's entrance. I glanced at it absently, until my name caught my eye. Table 5, Marla Roland Walker and Reuben Walker. Roland-Walker. Not my maiden name. Not his alone. Both. I blinked. I hadn't used a hyphen since the elopement. But Celeste had insisted for years that Walker wasn't refined enough and that Roland should remain visible for social continuity. But I hadn't told anyone how I now signed my name in quiet rebellion, Marla Walker. No hyphen. Curious, I checked other names. Celeste Roland, seated at table 7. We weren't even at the same table. And then it hit me. Renee had intentionally separated us. She had chosen the name I preferred. It was subtle. But it was loud to those who understood family dynamics. I wasn't being placed under my mother's shadow anymore. I was being seen on my own terms. The evening wound on. I gave a toast, not planned, just heartfelt. People clapped. Some cried. Ruben squeezed my hand the entire time. And Celeste? She clapped too. Quietly. She didn't speak. She didn't interrupt. But her eyes were glassy. At the end of the night, I approached her table. She stood when she saw me. I hope it's okay that I used the name you go by now, she said. Renee asked me. I told her to use what you prefer. That tiny decision, letting go of the hyphen, was more meaningful than any apology could have been. You finally let go of your grip, I said. Took long enough. I had to lose you first, she said, and to her credit, there was no self-pity in it. We stood there a moment longer. Not friends. Not enemies. Just two women who'd finally stepped out of the old roles they'd played for too long. And then, my final move. I reached into my small clutch and handed her an envelope. She frowned but took it. Inside was a photo of me and Ruben standing on the porch of our home, holding the sold sign with our realtor. We were both laughing. The sun was shining. It was the same picture we had framed in our hallway. On the back, in my handwriting, I wrote, "This is what happens when you stop listening to doubt and start trusting yourself. This is what irresponsible looks like. Love, Marla." Her fingers lingered on the photo. She looked up, trying to swallow whatever emotion was clawing up her throat. I didn't wait for her to speak. I turned, took Ruben's arm, and walked away. And this time, I didn't look back.